This video is going to be a little bit different than a lot of comparison videos you've seen on either my channel or other running shoe reviewer channels. Rather than just comparing these shoes head to head, I am going to also be comparing their drop-in midsoles. And the way I plan to do that is to not only run on each shoe with its drop-in midsole, but I plan to swap out the drop-in midsoles. So I'm going to take the ATPU drop-in midsole from the Eliot Racer, and I'm going to plug it into the On CloudBoom Strike. So then I will have the On CloudEliot Racer. And then I'm going to take the PIBA drop-in from the On CloudBoom Strike and drop it into the Tracksmith Eliot Racer. So I will have the Tracksmith Eliot Strike. These shoes have a lot more in common with each other than a lot of other super shoes do. Both of them are the same price in the United States, which is $280 USD. Both of them have the drop-in midsole that I mentioned earlier. Both of them are what I would consider long course super shoes that favor the marathon and don't so much favor the shorter distances. They both come with these silicone coated laces that help them to prevent from coming untied. However, on the CloudBoom Strike, I did yank those out because they were a lot thinner. They came untied a lot, so I replaced them with serrated aftermarket laces. But they both had the same idea, at least. They're both boutique brands that focus on high quality materials where they're really trying to take their name brand to they're both kind of bougie brands, I'll say it that way. Where the differences are, the uppers are not totally different. They're both non-elastic upper, but I think the Tracksmith Eliot Racer has a lot more comfortable and form-fitting upper, especially around the heel and around the throat of the shoe with this faux suede. It's very soft, whereas the On CloudBoom Strike has a couple of pads there, but there's not a lot of padding there. I have gotten abraded on the heel there, but only once, and usually Sock Choice fixes that. I feel that this upper is a little bit more fussy than the Tracksmith Eliot Racer upper, but the Tracksmith Eliot Racer upper is a little snug. The Eliot Racer is a little bit heavier by about 0.2 ounces, and we're talking like 6 or 7 grams. I think this guy, the On CloudBoom Strike, is 213 grams, and this one's 220 grams, if I'm not mistaken. They both have reasonable outsole coverage. I think the grip on the Eliot Racer is going to be a little bit better than the grip on the CloudBoom Strike. The CloudBoom Strike has more stack. It's closer to 35, 36 in the forefoot and 40 in the rear foot for a 4mm drop. And the Tracksmith Eliot Racer is going to be 30 in the forefoot, actually 30.5 in the forefoot and 38 in the rear foot for a 7.5mm drop. Not totally max stack, but only a couple of millimeters less. Performance-wise, I think they both really shine at a marathon pace, maybe a little bit faster, but again, I would not really grab these if I'm going to plan on doing 5K or 10K pace. Okay, so first things first, I'm comparing the On CloudBoom Strike and the Tracksmith Eliot Racer side by side with their own respective drop-ins in the appropriate shoe. And I've done this once before on the Tracksmith Eliot Racer review, so this is the first time I've compared them side by side. To reiterate though, the CloudBoom Strike is softer. There's a little bit more of a dynamic set into the foam, especially in the midfoot. But the Eliot Racer has more of a lockdown feel and a little bit of a quicker response. So while it is also soft, it doesn't feel as soft, just a little bit more of a quick dynamic response rather than a deep dynamic response, which I found with aliphatic TPU midsoles. We'll see what happens when I switch them out, the drop-ins. Alright, I have the, I guess I'm going to call it On CloudEliot Racer. It's the On CloudBoom Strike with the Eliot Racer drop-in. And the difference I can notice it. It almost feels, at least when I start off, a little bit spongier than the regular on CloudBoom Strike with the CloudBoom Strike drop-in. It's almost like the quicker response from the ATPU drop-in is getting tempered by the PIBA underneath. The fit is great. It seems to slide in there nice and easily. Of course, the drop-in for the Eliot Racer is a little bit more snug of a fit in its own shoe. We'll see what happens when I do the reverse of these. But now that I run in it for about a half a mile, it's not totally different from the original feel of the CloudBoom Strike. Maybe it just needs to warm up and get to a higher pace to start feeling that way. Alright, so we're going to call this the Tracksmith Eliot Strike, which is the Tracksmith Eliot Racer with the CloudBoom Strike's drop-in. And I'm actually surprised by the amount of room I have in the forefoot now. I wouldn't call it overly roomy, but it's not as snug. Also, the response is a little bit more direct. I don't feel as much of the give and the dynamism. It feels more like a Saucony Endorphin Pro 1, the original version. That's not necessarily good or bad. Saucony was still kind of cutting their teeth in the super shoe game. It just feels like it's not quite as dynamic as the original Tracksmith Eliot Racer that is. So I want to say that even though the CloudBoom Strike had more give in response with the regular drop-ins, the ATPU drop-in does add a lot to the dynamism of the Tracksmith Eliot Racer, because with the on CloudBoom Strike drop-in, it's just not as much give. So I'm going to try them side by side next. Okay, now I have the Tracksmith Eliot Strike on the left foot, and I have the on CloudEliot Racer on the right. Side by side, without a doubt, the more responsive drop-in midsole comes from the Eliot Racers, that ATPU drop-in and the Eliot Racer. However, the more responsive shoe overall with its original drop-in is the CloudBoom Strike. And now that I think about it, having them side by side, the CloudEliot Racer, the CloudBoom Strike with the Eliot Racer drop-in, doesn't feel spongy anymore. It feels bouncy from heel to toe throughout the whole midsole. And definitely there is more cushion and more stack in the Tracksmith Eliot Racer drop-in. When you add that to the construction of the CloudBoom Strike chassis, you get a super reboundy shoe that still, I think, is going to be only good for the marathon, maybe half marathon, not for the shorter distance stuff. But having these side by side, it just feels like there's so much more stack in the on CloudEliot Racer. The magic is definitely in the ATPU drop-in. Hey there, Khan's gonna help me with this shoe talk. He's gonna help me keep my thoughts together. So really, I've been comparing two shoes, the on CloudBoom Strike and the Tracksmith Eliot Racer, but really I've been comparing four shoes because I've also been comparing two drop-in midsoles. The PIBA drop-in midsole from the CloudBoom Strike and the aliphatic TPU drop-in midsole from the Eliot Racer. And I would say, as far as a marathon racing shoe, the on CloudBoom Strike is probably a better choice. Come on, Khan. is probably a better choice than the Tracksmith Eliot Racer. However, the Tracksmith Eliot Racer is more comfortable, and if I were traveling and maybe going to do some workouts or long runs, I might bring the Tracksmith Eliot Racer with me, especially if I wanted to look good while doing it. I need all the help I can get, right? But I would probably use the CloudBoom Strike for a race or for a race-specific long run with a lot of pace. However, between the two drop-in midsoles, the aliphatic TPU Tracksmith Eliot drop-in midsole is the superior of the two. And I took a picture of them actually. You can tell that it's actually a much thicker midsole than the Peeble one and the On CloudBoom Strike, which would make sense because it made the CloudBoom Strike less baggy and more form-fitting. And when I had them switched out, the Eliot Racer was less snug and a little bit more roomy. And that tells me that this has more volume of foam. So when it comes down to it, out of the 4 incarnations, the most pleasing to me was the On CloudEliot Racer, which is the On CloudBoom Strike with the Eliot Racer drop-in. So even though that is entertaining, you might say, well, what does this have to do with me other than being a fun experiment? I talked to one of the Tracksmith employees at the Tracksmith store in Boston, and he said that down the road, Tracksmith will be allowing you to buy the drop-in midsole separately in case you need to replace just that part of the Eliot Racer. So if you don't have the Eliot Racer, but you have the CloudBoom Strike and want to just add a little bit more oomph to it, you could buy that part separately and switch out your On drop-in for your Tracksmith drop-in and get all their powers combined with none of their weaknesses. So that is my conclusion for this great experiment. I hope you enjoyed it. Khan certainly was entertained, although something else has his attention right now. I'm going to take him on a walk, and don't forget to like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and we'll see you on the next run.